Good evening and welcome to the Kent City Council meeting for April 21st, 2020. We are conducting this meeting virtually over the Zoom platform this evening as a result of the Stay Home, Stay Healthy order that's been issued by the governor's office. I'd like to welcome everyone, and Kim, if you could call the roll, please.
For Mayor.
Kim, perfect, thank you. All right, and if I could just remind the participants to go ahead and mute while you're on the call, then that will help us manage the feedback. With that, we will move on to item number 3, which is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from council, administration, or staff?
No changes from staff this evening.
All right, thank you. Seeing no changes, Council President, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
So move.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. We will move into public communications, and tonight the first item on our agenda is an update from Councilmember Reagan Dunn on the state of the county. Councilmember, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate you being here and providing us with the update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for having me, and greetings also to the City Council and City Council President. Grateful for the chance to be here. I thought it made sense for me to come on in and give a quick presentation on COVID-19 very specifically, and then answer questions and more importantly, get feedback from you all on sort of what's happening in your community, what's happening there with the quarantine facility and things that I can take back to my colleagues and also our elected executive on how we could improve what we're doing. So bear with me, I'm a low-tech man in a high-tech world, and I could use a haircut, but I'm going to do the very best I can right now with this PowerPoint. So bear with me. Okay. Can you see that PowerPoint?
We can.
Okay. And you should be able to see 2 slides up there. Okay.
Yes.
Correct, side by side.
All right. Let me just, I've broken this down as best I can. It's a synthesis of a lot of different data, but much of this you've seen, maybe you haven't seen it all together. So obviously, this pandemic is changing the way that we are governing. It's changing the economy in dramatic ways. People are sick, people are dying. It's a very substantial public event, the likes of which, well, we haven't seen for a century. I was a presidential appointee at the Justice Department in September of 2001, governed through the September 11th crisis, and also had the opportunity as an elected councilman to govern through the Great Recession. And this is really bigger than both of those. And it's caught a lot of us in a very challenging situation that we have to govern to for our constituents. But let's start with some facts, and then we'll get to questions more generally. First, looking at the first slide, this is, as of yesterday, the total number of cases in King County, just under 5,300 cases. It jumped up around 100 plus more today. And you'll see very generally the slide, let's see here. Let me shrink that out of there. Okay. You'll see that we hit the top of the spike, depending on who you talk to, somewhere between the 27th and the 10th of April. New cases, daily new cases are a leading indicator. A lagging indicator is deaths. Let's move to the next slide. Great, thanks. You'll see the aggregate number of deaths in King County, just over 360, tragically. And you'll see the curve lagging slightly behind the new cases in terms of deaths related to COVID-19 in King County. Go ahead, next slide. This is data from the New York Times. And this either as of today or last night. It shows confirmed cases by metro area. You'll see we are much farther along than most other communities in the United States, because we in the Puget Sound area had the first case of COVID-19, and we presume it spread from that point through the Life Care Nursing Center, among others, unknown for a while. What that data also shows, however, is that our trajectory isn't as steep as many of the other cities across the United States, major metropolitan areas. If you look over at the screen to the right, deaths by metro area, you'll see that we are doing better than a lot of, well, Detroit being a similarly sized city, than a lot of other communities across the United States. And more importantly, the curve is flat. A very high curve, a very steep curve indicates potential to overwhelm hospital capacity. And so we have been called a model. We don't think of ourselves as a model. I certainly don't. There's lots of room for improvement. We have been called a model from a lot of communities across the country, including the CDC. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to breeze through these because the data used to include Seattle, and we're way down towards the bottom on both of these slides. Let's move forward. And you'll see, again, a longer trajectory there on the left-hand slide of daily growth rate of confirmed cases. It's growing very, very slowly at this point. You'll look, by the way, on that left-hand slide, you'll see some increases. Places like Ohio and places like Massachusetts and other places where where the virus has gone viral, so to speak, is really peaking in various places. So it hits different communities at different times. And in a way, we were lucky to have it early. I hope that continues to be the case. The daily growth rate for deaths, we are way, way down towards the bottom in that slide. Okay, next set of slides. Social distancing and the local public health stay-at-home order is what King County is doing, obviously following what the state and the governor have moved forward. We continue to do that. I'm going to speak about that in more detail in a minute. My views on the issue differ quite a bit from the president's on this issue. We can go into detail on that. Some of the things we've done very specifically, signed a letter to delay the property tax deadline, now set up until June 1st. That's one of the ways that we can indirectly help people who are affected. We've done some movement of money for emergency funding of childcare, $2.2 million for first responders and other workers struggling to meet childcare needs. Let's go to the next slide. So let me talk about the Kent Motel. I know that you're on regular communication with members of the executive staff. I want to tell you what I'm being told from them, and I'd like to hear after this is done, if the mayor will permit, just some feedback on your views on it, what you think is and is not being done. But this is what I was told today. There are 23 folks in the facility there. The capacity is up to 79. It's supposed to be individuals cannot safely self-quarantine or isolate in their own home or do not have a home. This facility is supposed to have security, a site manager, and healthcare professionals on site 24/7. I was also told in the past it would be an off-duty law enforcement officer. I don't know if that's happening. Health and behavioral health care professionals are supposed to monitor health status and symptoms. Obviously, we saw the death yesterday, which is never good. Meals, snacks, and essentials will be provided through a drop and go protocol. All occupants have a 24/7 number to call if they need assistance or supplies. Anyone needing acute care will be transported to a licensed medical facility. Transportation will be provided to and from the site. Okay, that's what's coming out of the executive's office. Next slide, please. All right, more on the Kent update. Executive office contact is Corinne, and he is the legislative liaison between the executive and the King County Council. And there's supposed to be weekly check-ins with the directors, DCHS site director, and Corinne. The South King County COVID-19 response facility calls and emails are supposed to be happening, invited to provide weekly updates. Chamber president is supposed to be coordinating questions and responses submitted to the chamber president. COVID-19 response grants, executive's office of equity and social justice is focused on areas impacted by the COVID-19 response facilities. There was discussion at the council about enhancing those grants today, where Dwight Dively, our council CEO, discussed that matter. Residential mailers out to all folks within a half a mile of the facility. And it's supposed to be community group outreach and education funding. And those are some of the lists of some of the grantees that have been provided, I am told. Next slide, please. So what is coming from the executive's website is that these can be up to 18 months planned as of now. And 2 nursing and behavioral health specialists on site. And these specifically are to extend the ability to stay at home for those unable to comply. So basic medical sort of nurse level and behavioral health care for meals. And then you'll see those locations, the 5 of them right now that are across the county. Let's go to the next slide. Now there's the assessment and recovery centers. These are a little different. There are 4 of those down below, and those are shorter term, 2 to 3 months, encompassing the peak of positive cases. This assumes we have a single wave event or one of high intensity. We'll have some waves, but they're supposed to be, we hope, lower. The staffing is scalable day and night, depending on the number of beds that are occupied. And the function of these assessment and recovery centers are to relieve the stress on hospitals to allow them to focus on patients with the acute care needs. And so the types of services provided there are basic medical and behavioral health care, small scale dispensary pharmacy, ability to provide COVID-19 testing as well. And those are some of the areas you've seen on the news in Shoreline and Soto and Eastgate. Okay, next slide. And then there's the shelter de-intensification sites, the Bellevue shelter, the Renton shelter facility, and the SeaTac shelter. You'll know the one in Renton. It's the red line right up there where 167 and 405 meet, not also without some controversy. Okay, next slide. Oh, next slide. You still hear me? There we go. Try the next one. Is there one more? There we go. Perfect. Right there. Okay, so this is the stark reality of the situation. I guess this is from the Times. I'm glad to see it's a local source. These are the unemployment claims, and you'll see that this is unprecedented in Washington state history. And, you know, obviously gives me incredibly great concern if this were a trend that we're going to continue for 2 or 3 years, like a major recession or even the Great Depression did. I'm hopeful that the fact that this is a pandemic and the community health will ultimately recover, that this is far more elastic, but nobody really knows. All I can tell you is, you know, I've told a number of you to be careful that the possibility of a recession could come. This is that, and then some. We did have the benefit of maxing our rainy day reserve funds across the board to the maximum allowed by state law, and we have done that, but we're also expending those dollars very, very quickly. Okay, next slide. Oh, next slide. You guys hear me?
We can. So the slide on the screen is federal response and stimulus.
Oh, interesting.
I'm wondering if there's a bit of a lag back to we're at state resources and aid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing different slide here. Let's see what we can do here. Can't start screen sharing. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get real tricky here and look at my phone. No, your unemployment claims. Just bear with me, guys. Sorry. My wife is assisting me. She is doing a great job. Okay. I got it. Thanks, dear. I'm getting texts from my chief of staff and everybody else. Just tell me what slide you're on, and I got it from memory.
State resources and aid. So the Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant Program.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, I wish I could see that. Go back to Project Care real quick, if you don't mind.
So there we go.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, great. So let me speak to that issue. Okay, I also have this in front of me. So this was the slide in front of the employment slide that I just spoke to. But Project Care is something that we started at the county COVID Action Response Enlistment Program. It is essentially a platform upon which we can harness the volunteerism and expertise from the local community to try and make a difference from people's homes. Things like donating to the food banks, things like sewing personal protective equipment, masks, and other things to help people. We've been really focusing on that. It's also a one-stop shop for the various nonprofits, food service providers, and others that you might want to support or contribute to or volunteer your expertise in some way to help. So do take a look at that. There's a lot of videos that are being posted on how to things, and that's a really good program that we're proud of. Okay, let's go to state resources and aid. There we go. Okay, now we're back on. The Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant, that was $10 million for small businesses, and that has now had the funds expended. I know they're going to try and replenish some of that. There's a new Employment Security Department emergency rules to relieve the burden of temporary layoffs. ESD had their site crash yesterday, but it's back up. They're also working on expanded sick leave and workers' compensation, and emergency order requiring Washington Health Insurance to waive the co-pays and co-insurance and deductibles. So that all those steps are being taken. Let's go to the next one. Federal response stimulus. So this is the update as of today. We saw phase one, about an $8.3 billion right out of the gate. I think it just indicated Congress' intention to act on it. And then phase two, the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, which was $2 trillion, targeted for relief of individuals and businesses and expansion of testing. Phase three, the one that we most heard about, was the CARES Act, which is $2.2 trillion stimulus package to help across the board. There are 6 jurisdictions in Washington state that all receive a substantial amount of money from that. And they are Spokane County, King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County, the city of Seattle, and then the state are all getting money. We are aggressively working with Dwight Dively for him to finalize the program through which reimbursement compensation for municipalities can be as easily handled as possible. They're coming up with a simple form for the cities to provide that request. Phase three, they're working on it today. I saw the Senate just unanimously passed it here a little while ago. They're calling it 3.5, which tells us there's more coming. That's what that tells me. It's being considered, I know it passed the Senate, $500 billion approximately in funding for small business, hospitals, and testing. And I can get a breakdown of that if you want me to send that along. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about some of the reimbursements from the CARES Act. The whole chunk was 150 billion. Washington State getting about 1.33 billion of that. King County is going to receive around 260 million. It's based on population essentially, and there's not really any clear guidance on it. We're doing the very best we can. Councilmember Balducci and I are pushing very hard to ensure that the county only take what absolutely it needs, and everything else is passed through, we hope, to the municipalities in the broadest possible way within the scope of the federal law. Again, as I mentioned, they're developing a form for jurisdictions to report. And then there's also a possibility that the additional monies that went to the state could be also used to support local jurisdictions. And we'll want to see the Sound Cities Association weigh in heavily on that issue, as well as the city of Kent. Let's go to the next slide. SBA programs, they have, many of them have run out of money. You saw that some of fairly good-sized corporations were receiving these loans, and there's actually a list being kind of sent around. I think it's entitled the shame list, but that some of those companies are giving them back. My brother owns a small business. He employs up to about 20 people at a given time, and he was approved for a small paycheck protection program, as well as the economic injury disaster loan assistance. But I'd like to see this enhanced, made more available moving forward. But you can, Paula Furman is our SBA regional advocate. He's a friend of mine, and we can help connect you with him if you have friends that are small businesses that want to benefit from this program. Okay, next slide. We have a $26 million rainy day fund. The council approved $28.2 million from the COVID-19 response. We've spent around $25-30 million on COVID-19 response. FEMA is going to reimburse many of those expenses. And the county has spent about $50 million on various acquisitions and setup and operation of the sites. That's a big chunk of money. The county's chief economist is predicting the general fund will decrease between 26 million and 29 million for 2020. So that means the cuts are going to be hard. They're going to be painful, but survivable also. I asked the question to Dwight today if you know, we're going to be like Detroit or like Orange County, California back in 2009 when they had to declare bankruptcy. And the answer to that is, while some jurisdictions across the country may in fact have to do that, the county at least will not be one of those, given the way we've postured for this. So I think a very important point in all this is that the Office of Economic and Financial Analysis is releasing their forecast in late May. So we'll have a lot more real data with I hope the worst of the pandemic behind us in May for us to base our dollars and decisions. Next slide. One of the things we are starting to focus on, obviously the pandemic is really the first priority, is how do we come out of this recession as quickly as possible. So the executive, myself, and Chair Balducci are working on a coronavirus recovery economic task force, or CURE. It will be a public-private blue ribbon commission of captains of industry locally, as well as some state and local leaders from various sectors who are going to get together and figure out best ways to prime the pump of this economy, to get us back to where we were a couple of months ago, how to properly leverage stimulus dollars so that we, if we're lucky enough to be among the first communities to emerge from the pandemic, that we are able to jump back in with both feet and get the economy going as the governor dials up those decisions to do so. Next slide. The section that I wanted in there on the curves on the pandemic were not included. So I will speak to them very generally. There is a good deal of research out there that show that historically, if you look at the pandemic of 1918, that the communities that use strong social distancing, believe it or not, were not only the first communities to come out of the recession locally, but their manufacturing and other economic sectors were quicker to return and had better returns. And so social distancing and economic prosperity, in my judgment, are not diametrically opposed. They can be the same. There's this paradigm that's developing at the national level. They're saying it's either lives on one side or livelihood on another, on a seesaw, and that isn't based in fact. Let me put it that way. What we're seeing is what we've seen in the past is that the ability to get through a curve is the best indicator that you're going to get through an economic recession and come out of it more quickly. And there's a lot of historical data that support that. So there are certain sectors of the economy that need to be slowly dialed up, even as soon as now, where there's low impact, and some of those areas include construction and some of the other things you've heard of. But overall, I want to tell you that I support. This is my own view. You don't have to agree with me here, but I do support very much the governor's approach right now. I think it's the wise approach. I think it's based in science. I don't think there's value in rallying thousands of people on the front doors of the Capitol right now, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I've been somewhat public about that, but I just wanted you to hear that. And then I guess at that point, I think I'm done talking. Let me just see if there's any guidance, questions, criticism. I'm here to take it. I'm here to pass this information along, see if we can improve our work and our liaison with the city of Kent.
First, Councilmember Dunn, I want to say thank you so much for that report. There was a lot of really important data in that. I'm grateful for you taking the time to put that together and present it to council. You had asked a question on the hotel facility, and I do want to address a few of those things with you, but I have some questions from council members first.
Sure.
So I'm going to start with Councilmember Boyce.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, how you doing, Councilman Dunn?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Dunn, I know that you guys made the changes with the property tax, and you kind of pushed that off, which is good for people who don't have to pay. But when you make those type of changes, it also impact the city. For example, that means the city of Kent is going to be slowly getting their money. I also serve on the Kent Regional Fire Authority, who relies on that funding as well too. So my question, as you guys go forward, making the adjustment, somehow there need to be a balance. And I understand the fact we want to help people, but also we as a city and we as a RFA, we rely on those funds. And I just wonder how you're going to go about making an adjustment going forward. And do you reach out to the city and get their thoughts as you move forward, as you try to ease impact on people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We got to balance those interests, and the county doesn't have a cash flow problem right now anyway, but it doesn't mean that the cities or particularly the special purpose districts don't have those cash flow problems. We talked about that today at length with White and Ively. I don't think that anyone is interested in further extending those tax increases, but also we reached out to the large mortgage holders. More than half of them pay the taxes for their clients, and every single one of them actually paid their taxes on or before the deadline. So there has been a substantial set of payments on this 6-month period's taxes already, and that's good news. So we're hoping that reduces the crunch for special purpose districts.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks. Let me just forecast something though that is concern. and I disagree with some of the county leadership on this, because I don't think we should sort of sweep it under the rug. There are going to be substantial challenges to those special purpose districts in the next year or two as a result of something called pro-rationing, or what we also call levy suppression. When the aggregate tax load goes above $5.90 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, the junior taxing districts, like fire districts, even hospital districts, get suppressed. And we're going to see a lot of that. It's going to be a bit of a train wreck. There are some ways we can mitigate it, but it's important that special purpose districts know that there's going to be real trouble downstream because they're junior taxing districts, and there isn't enough under the state law to go around to satisfy the levy needs. And that's why this long-standing challenge of cities and the county and the parks and the library district all increasing their taxes without coordination is going to create a train wreck, and it's going to be a real big problem. But we'll work with you on that moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fincher.
Wanted to, are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Hi, Brenda, I can hear you.
Thank you. Councilmember Dunn. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Councilmember Dunn, I just wanted to say thank you, and I very much appreciate what you had to say tonight. I was glad to hear that you recognized the pains that the cities are going to go to in the way of loss of revenue. And I'm also very glad to hear, and the mayor will address questions about the Corona Motel, basically, but that you are checking into that. And I was also happy to hear your leadership, that you are going to be just staying on top of this, what you have done so far, we appreciate. Thank you for speaking to us tonight. Thank you for trying to look out for us. Thank you for recognizing the importance of SCA in all of this and the cities in this. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Oh, thanks, Councilmember. I appreciate the kind words. We'll continue to work with you.
Okay. Any additional questions from council before we head into one of our favorite topics, which is the what's affectionately become known as the Corona Lodge here in Kent?
Corona Lodge. Man, oh man.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So let's just sort of jump right in. I do want to start with acknowledging absolutely Curran from the executive's office, and most recently in the last couple of weeks, Leo Floor. We have worked out a rhythm in our communications, and I am grateful for that. As you know, Councilmember Dunn, we have had a significant amount of concern around the facility and questions, and we got off to a rocky start, but I do feel like we're headed down a path of open communication. I am pleased to report that I got a phone call from both of them yesterday upon the passing of the gentleman at the facility with as much information as they had. So extremely grateful for that.
I'm glad they did that. I was worried that my sending you that press release was the first you'd heard of it. So I'm glad. Good.
So I will tell you, the first thing that I did say to Curran in the morning is I am so grateful that I did not read about this in the media. So I feel like so and thank you for that. I know that you have been working diligently on our behalf to help with that. A couple of the specifics. So one of the things, I just took some notes as you went through the presentation.
Sure.
On the security side, so we too had been told that there would be off-duty law enforcement. We know that WSP was there for a while, and then some contract agencies, and then I want to say it was end of the week before last or last week that we were told there was no budget for that going forward, so that it would be King County facilities security that was on site. So
wait, say that one more time. You were told there was no budget for?
That it was cost prohibitive to have off-duty law enforcement at that site.
All right. So the background on that was I actually called for that from the executive privately and was told that we don't advocate for a police state here. And then the incident happened where the individual went across the street and stole something from the store. And I went public, essentially agreeing with you, Madam Mayor, that this needed to happen. And I was told that it was happening. So that is concerning to me, and I'm glad to hear that information. Not glad to hear it, but I'm glad to know, and I will do something about that. Of course there's money for that. It's ridiculous.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
One of the other things we talked about was transportation. So in our very early conversation, transportation to and from the facility, in our very early conversations, when the city was really just advocating for a voice in this and to go through our process, we were told that there would be transportation back for the people that were staying there to the community of origin. During one of the court hearings, the deputy prosecutor said that that would be a violation of people's civil liberties to require them to go back to where the community of origin. Where we left that, the last information we had is that they are being offered a lift, like the Uber, the Lyft ride, and that's the extent of what can be done there. So
what would you like to see? Is there a position
we would like to see folks taken back to the community of origin?
Okay. Good.
So just, just as a point, just because that's where we started and we didn't end up there.
Right, I'll make that voice heard. I'll make that voice heard.
Thank you.
Yes.
You had a couple of slides about business outreach. So to my understanding, that's not occurring on a regular basis. I actually had a conversation or an email exchange with a business that's directly to the south of the facility. And we do now have a meeting with a phone call with Curran on the books for, I believe, later this week. But I'm not aware of any sort of ongoing outreach that's occurring short of the incidents. When an incident occurs, then, I know the gentleman that left the facility 3 times in one night and went across the street. I know that then there was conversation with that business owner, but I don't think that that's happening on any sort of regular basis.
Okay, well, let's ramp that up then.
Okay. And then just the last, so I think our biggest concern, and you had it in the slide about this potentially being 18 months, we have asked from the very, very beginning that it not be a permanent facility. We understand from talking to Leo Floor that the curve is different, especially in the homeless population, and then we understand the need for those increased services. But just as a community, our ask is that this not be a permanent facility, whether it be for COVID or for any other type of quarantine. And that's, I think, our biggest concern on an ongoing basis, that this not be a permanent impact to the Kent community, economy, and all of those things.
Well, I 100% agree with you. It should not be permanent by any stretch. It should be used in a way that is consistent with the Kent's vision of the city. I will advocate for that, and I continue to, and will not be appropriating any further money. And I hope it's nowhere near 18 months for the COVID usage. I hope we can get through this quickly. You're right, though. The homeless population, we're seeing it move through that community quite quickly, as we knew we would. And so, I mean, I'm glad there are some. There's a plan for that. That's good. It's unfortunate the way this was rolled out. It just wasn't rolled out well, and I wish we had a second chance to do that. But it is what it is, and I will continue to advocate for that and stay involved at every level to make sure that it doesn't, that there isn't sort of mission creep, or that bureaucrats at King County think that this is a way that they'll get their beachhead into your community on visions for that facility that aren't consistent with your city.
Well, thank you so much. It makes me very, very happy to hear that. Like, so you've been very consistent in that message, and we are grateful. On a larger front, I will tell you, wearing my SCA president hat, we do have a conversation set up at the end of the week with Dwight Dively to talk about the impacts on the county budget and what that looks like for cities. So want to say thank you for that communication. We are most definitely all in this together. And as we go through all of this, we need to keep talking, and that because there's decisions that are being made that impact all of us. Councilmember Boyce brought the one up about property tax, and 100% understand why that decision's made. Just want to continue to advocate for open conversation, and like I said, we are seeing definite improvements there, and don't want that mistaken for not being grateful, because I most definitely am.
Oh yeah, no, my pleasure. What you've obviously agree to sign the city's letter on the issue with respect to the governor's line item, their veto. Is there any update on that, if you don't mind?
Sure. So yes, the governor vetoed not only our streamlined sales tax going forward, but then took that money that had already been committed in the budget year ending in July of 21. Thank you so much for signing on in support of that. We have not had the next level of conversation with the governor.
Okay.
There's a mayor's call tomorrow, and I will be bringing that up with him in that conversation. But again, appreciate your support. As you know, that is on top of all of the impacts from COVID-19, that money being taken away that had already been committed was a significant hit to us.
Oh, it's brutal. It's just brutal. And you're not the only city. Issaquah and others have the same.
Exactly.
I learned today from the call that this federal money can be used quite clearly for reimbursement to the local municipalities, but the lost revenue isn't yet something that could be replaced. And so what we are doing is employing a broader federal strategy with our members of Congress to try and get that included. We want to be able to flesh that out a little bit, because it's just a brutal hit, and it'll trickle down to a lot of different sectors if we can't find a way to make you whole, or at least close to whole.
Well, again, thank you so much for your support, your advocacy on behalf of Kent, and all the work that you're doing for all of us. We're extremely grateful.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, thank you very much for having me, Madam Mayor, and keep up the good work. We're in this together. We will get through it. And I think this is just a time when Republicans and Democrats and independents and nonpartisans need to be working together, united, not divided. And that's the kind of leadership that will get us through it, a united front. And we'll disagree about things around the edges, but at the end of the day, I'd like to see Washington State and King County be the first major metropolitan area in the country to come out of this pandemic. And then we can really do some good for the rest of the country who will still be mired in it. So thanks for having me, Madam Mayor.
Well said, and have a wonderful evening, Councilmember.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic presentation. We have great support from all three of our King County Council members, and I am grateful for that. All right, we will move on in the agenda under public communications. I do have two proclamations this evening. As we've spoken about previously in our virtual meetings, we are not obviously inviting folks to come down and receive them, but I do want to make the council and the community aware of two proclamations that were issued in the past week. The first one was for National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. So that's a long way of talking about our 911 dispatchers and call receivers. I do want to read this proclamation. I think it's extremely important. And our 911 folks are providing us significant service, not only during this time of crisis, but on a daily basis, 365 days a year. So the proclamation says, whereas the City of Kent recognizes the men and women who play a vital role in the protection of our community members, businesses, and visitors, and whereas Valleycom has successfully serving the public safety communication needs of the City of Kent, and whereas Valleycom call receivers and dispatchers are important first responders who endure long hours, abnormal schedules, and stressful work situations daily. Their ability to remain calm under pressure have saved the lives of countless Kent residents, employees, and visitors. And whereas Valleycom staff are essential first responders, they play a critical role in effectively coordinating emergency services to ensure the health and safety of our residents, businesses, and visitors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Dana Ralph, do hereby proclaim the week of April 12th through the 18th National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week and urge all citizens to pay tribute to our 911 call receivers, dispatchers, and support staff and managers, and to recognize the substantial contributions they have made to our health, safety, welfare, and quality of life. I was very pleased to go and properly social distance present that proclamation to our wonderful call receivers and dispatchers at ValleyCom last week. I have one additional proclamation, and this is for Bike Everywhere Month. So in the spirit of folks having a little more time on their hands and maybe picking up a new skill or dusting off one that they had previously, and when our world does return to normal, we want to continue talking about the importance of bicycles in our community. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. Whereas Kent residents find that bicycling is a popular and viable means of personal transportation, and whereas the Kent City Council desires to promote the use of bicycling as a mode of urban transportation in the city, and whereas the role of the bicycle in Kent as an economical mode of personal transportation will continue to increase in importance in coming years, and whereas bike facilities like the Interurban Trail, the Green River Trail, and the Sioux Creek Trail are intensively used for commuting, recreation, and other bike trips, and whereas encouraging people to ride bicycles decreases traffic congestion, reduces demands on parking facilities, avoids raising fuel expenses, and whereas concerns for personal health, having clean air to breathe, and preserving the planet to make bicycling an increasingly attractive alternative and to unrestricted use of an automobile, and whereas the city desires to have an active role in promoting the safety and well-being of those who use bicycles for all transportation purposes, now therefore I, Dana Ralph, Mayor of the City of Kent, do hereby proclaim May 2020 as Bike Everywhere Month in the City of Kent and call upon the people of the city to support this observance by riding their bicycles everywhere while educating and encouraging others to utilize this mode of travel. I do want to take this opportunity with this proclamation to thank our Bicycle Advisory Group. It is a committee of citizens that have come together to help the City of Kent understand the needs of both recreational and commuting cyclists, and to make sure that when we are building out our transportation plans, that voice is represented so that we can meet the needs of bicyclists in our community. So I want to say thank you to that Bicycle Advisory Board for providing that input and service to our community. Okay, moving on in the agenda, the next item, generally we have a lot to talk about under this. I will ask Council President Troutner if she has any community events to speak about this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not have any events to share. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do want to encourage folks to stay connected to social media. There are a lot of virtual activities that are occurring in our city, fundraising, support for groups, opportunities for donations. While we're we're currently not able to do these things in person, I have been extremely impressed with the amount of creativity that is happening in our community around making sure that we're still supporting each other. So please check out your Facebook and Twitter feeds for all of those opportunities. I know they're being promoted well across the city. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our public safety report, and joining us is Chief Padilla.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. It's my pleasure to bring you tonight's report. If you could, Kim, next slide there. I want to start with introducing three of our newest officers. As you know, traditionally we bring our new officers to be sworn in before the council and the community, where they can publicly say their oath, which is a commitment to uphold the laws, protect and serve, but it's also a commitment to serve compassionately to the community. In light of everything that's going on now, we had the honor of doing that. Mayor, you had the oath read by them last April 10th. And so I just want to take a moment to introduce them via the internet, if you will, to the community. Looking at the three pictures there, I'll start with Officer David Castro. David is a lateral officer from the California Highway Patrol. He came to us here recently. He's married to his wife, Genevieve, is currently working through his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University. And prior to us, in addition to being a California Highway Patrolman, he worked 2 years as a custody officer with the Whittier Police Department. We asked him why he chose Kent, and he said because Kent has a great atmosphere and stability of the department, and said the amount of support the department receives from local officials and the support from the chain of command has really made KPD an ideal place to work. Something interesting about David is that he is a big foodie, which was a surprise to me because he's kind of a slender guy, and he likes to explore new places and eat. He also enjoys hiking with his wife and their 2 Belgian Malinois. So David Castro. Next up in the middle there, you'll see Officer Douglas Hicks. Mr. Hicks is an entry-level officer. He was born and raised in this area here in Seattle. He has some college, and before Kent Police, he was a lab manager for a Department of Defense engineering contractor. We asked him about why Kent. He said that when he was taking the testing through public safety testing, he met one of the Kent recruiters. When they were talking about why Kent, the recruiter mentioned that 5 years in Kent is the equivalent to 20 years anywhere else. So he found that very intriguing, looked into us, and ended up with us. He also has some sentimental attraction to Kent because somewhere along the Kent Des Moines Road is where he told his wife that he wanted to adopt the first child, and they subsequently adopted 3 more for a total of 4. Something interesting about him, in addition to his awesome wife and his amazing kids, he enjoys getting on his motorcycle and being home as much as he can with his family, and then tackling any other projects that come along, just as long as they don't involve snakes. So that's Officer Douglas Hicks. And last but not least, on the right there of the screen, I'd like to introduce Officer Jonathan Jarman. He grew up in California, but spent some years, about 5, living in Texas. He's halfway through his bachelor's degree in aviation management from Central Washington University. And before Kent, he worked in the United States Army for 8 years as an unmanned aerial systems maintainer and a technical inspector, and is currently serving still in the Army Reserve as a Chinook maintainer. So unmanned aerial systems, AKA drones, which works perfectly for us as we have a fleet of the UASs we deploy for various missions, car accidents, etc. We asked him why Kent. He said it was because it was a larger city with great opportunities. The police department was very well equipped and very professional. Something interesting about Officer Jarman is that he is an identical twin. So that is our newest and finest Kent police officers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next up, it gives me great pleasure to announce the promotion of one of our officers, Melanie Robinson, to the rank of police sergeant as of actually last week, Thursday. You may recognize Melanie as she has served as one of our public information officers over the years. So she's done TV interviews, worked with the media, etc. And it's an important step for her. It's a great step forward. The role of sergeant is really vital to the overall success and direction of where we go in the department. We set the vision at the chief's level. The commanders figure out the plan for how to execute that. But really the day-to-day and making sure it gets done comes really down to the sergeants. And Melanie is well equipped for that. Sergeants are the first line supervisors. They're responsible for mentorship, evaluation, accountability to the officers, training. And so that's an important role. A little bit of background on Melanie. Before becoming a sergeant, she served as 12 years in law enforcement, starting out in Maui PD, another Hawaii transplant, coming to Kent in 2011. Prior to that, she served as a juvenile corrections officer with Pierce County. Mel's assignments with Kent PD have included patrol officer, public information officer, property detective, background investigator, major crimes detectives, honor guard, peer fitness instructor, and now sergeant. So she has had a diversity and depth of experience and training, and it is very fitting that she has earned this spot. And speaking of earning the spot, Melanie went through a pretty exhaustive testing and selection process with 20 of her peers. And we didn't know at the time, but it ended up being one of the more difficult tests in the history of our department. She came through that with flying colors and has earned the spot absolutely. She loves people. She has a servant's heart, which is very important in this consideration, and truly is one of the best representatives of our department. I'm incredibly pleased to promote her to the rank of sergeant. Next, I'd like to touch in a little bit about what's going on with COVID from a police department perspective. We've all been working under the governor's stay-at-home order now for a little over a month. And I want to start by acknowledging and thanking the Kent community as the majority of people continue to do their best, adhere to the order. It is making a difference. It is saving lives. And so I would encourage our community to keep that up. We've been very fortunate in terms of Kent police officers and Kent police employees that we have had no known contracted employees with the virus. So nobody's gotten COVID. We've had several members tested, and so far everybody's come back negative on the test. I think a lot of that is due in part to the leadership, Mayor, from you and CEO Matheson, and some decisive steps we took early on to protect our employees. And, thank goodness it's paid off. Everybody's still healthy, which is great. That means we're fully operational. That means we have a full complement of staff. And so anything that comes our way, we're ready to serve, and our officers are out there. Looking at some of the crime trends during this COVID time, there are some alarming, concerning rises in crime that I want to discuss. Many of you may have seen the Seattle Times article that indicated that crime was down. I want to say that I found that not to be true in the region, amongst speaking with the other chiefs, and it's definitely not true here in Kent. While our non-emergency calls have been down because we've done everything we can to reduce in-person contact unless absolutely necessary, we are seeing spikes in crime in the categories of commercial burglaries, vehicle crimes, assaults, and shootings. Though this is a troubling trend, I think it's important to also say that the vast majority of the violent crime in particular has not been random or general. In fact, most of it's involved people that have known each other or had some prior conflict before the incident. There's also a common theme. A common thing amongst the victims in these crimes is that they were knowingly engaged in criminal activity, such as purchasing drugs at the time of the incident. So it's not random, and there's ways to stay out of it. The good news in all of this is that our officers are out there working hard to prevent the crime and have done a fantastic job in locating and arresting the majority of the suspects. Most of our recent crimes in particular, the suspects are either in jail or we've identified them, and it's just a matter of time before we locate them and put them in jail as well. What a lot of the criminals who are trying to take advantage of the current situation fail to realize is that because we've limited the in-person contacts and directed and enhanced our patrols, that our officers are out there more with time to look for, do community-based policing, and actually find bad guys. And like we've said all along, one of the major pushes over the years, as you've known, is that if we could give officers more time, if we could increase staffing, then they would be able to be better in position to catch bad guys, and they have. So as we see the spike in crime, we are also seeing significant increases in the number of arrests being made. So great job by our officers in that regard. As I looked at why we're possibly seeing the spike in particular, there's some obvious things. We've talked about criminals taking the advantage, specifically with all the high percentage of businesses that are shut down. They make for easier targets. There are more criminals on the street right now at all levels, local, county, and now state. Jails have been forced for social distancing to do some early release of criminals. And so there are more people out there that have been involved in crime. One of the other things we're seeing is that our schools are closed, and the result of that is a lot of our youth are out there with nowhere to go and nothing to do. And this sometimes evolves and turns into violent crime as well. So those are some key indicators as to what's going on. Again, what they're finding out, though, is there are a lot more presence out there with the police, and so that's not working out very well for many of them. Something that ties into this a little bit that's related is we've seen a spike in our racer crowd, our legal street racers. About 4 weeks ago, right after the governor's order, we had historically high number of racers come into our city and South King County in general, in the numbers totaled in the hundreds. They were causing a lot of havoc, definitely in addition to illegal street racing, definitely violating the stay-at-home order, and our officers struggled to deal with that initially. Since that time, we've gotten to work, and Commander Thompson was assigned to go out And we took an approach where we were going to go out, make contact, try to do some education, give warnings, and then see how the community responded in that regard. So we did that a couple weeks ago. We went out, we issued 140 warnings, and we did additionally make 6 arrests for a handful of the individuals who would not simply take heed to the warning and go on. So those were arrested, and so we've seen a decrease in the last week. My honest assessment is they will be back in force soon. And my clear statement I want to make to any would-be illegal racer is we are done with warnings, and the next phase will be enforcement. So please don't come to Kent and race. I get a lot of questions from time to time about, Chief, why are you wasting resources and time on racers? What's the big deal? And I want to remind everybody that the big deal is that every year we have fatality collisions and serious injury collisions as a result of racing. We have shootings, significant property damage, armed robberies, assaults, and horrible, horrible noise pollution that goes on throughout the city in the middle of the night. So it's not just kids horseplaying, it's serious issues, it's dangerous. And so we're going to do our part to prevent it and save lives. So again, don't race in Kent. Last, or one of the next things I want to talk about is crime prevention for businesses. We've touched on this through our social media, and we also did messaging through the Kent Chamber and Kent Downtown Partnership. But as we continue to see a rise in commercial burglaries, I think it's worth sharing the information one more time. We have a program called the Trespass Agreement Program, and what that allows businesses to do is to sign some documentation that gives the police department authority to remove anyone on their property when they're not there. So we can go in there and say, hey, business is closed, you need to leave, and failure to follow that order could result in arrest. It very rarely does, but it could. In this time where business owners are not at their businesses on a regular basis, obviously this is could be incredibly beneficial. And so for any business that would like to get signed up for the program, they can email me at policechief@kentwa.gov, and we will get them the paperwork and get them signed up, and our officers will begin doing a little extra patrols. In addition to the trespass agreement program, we're asking businesses to do some of the following crime prevention things. If possible, leave their interior lights on. It helps the officers see in the building, especially at night. Turn off public Wi-Fi, especially if it's accessible from outside your business. Cover and remove exterior electrical outlets to keep people from stealing power and or remaining on your property when you're not there. Lock all gates and other accesses to your property. Make sure your business alarms and cameras are working properly. And hopefully you have one of those systems that's allow you to monitor via video what's going on there. And lastly, we haven't said this before, and I want to make it clear now, that we consider going to check on your business to make sure it hasn't been damaged, things haven't been stolen, is essential travel. And we don't think it's in violation of the governor's order. And we are encouraging business owners to make trips as needed to go and check on their business, make sure things are okay. Should they find something wrong, should they find a break-in, we're asking that they call 911 and let us know. One, we want to start on the investigation right away. But two, we need that data to see where we need to put extra resources. If we're not getting the burglaries reported, we won't know to move officers to that location or that area. So we're asking for that, some tips for the businesses in that regard. Last on this subject, governor's order, I want to touch on that. We continue to see the vast majority of people comply with the order, but there are some who are not, like our racer crowd and others. And we just want to remind everybody, our approach is, please, we want voluntary compliance. We don't want to make any arrests. That's going to be a last resort only if we have to. And so just as a reminder, it is a misdemeanor. You can be arrested. It can be up to 90 days in jail and $1,000 fine. And we don't want that for anybody. So we're hoping that people will comply. And like I said, thank you for those who are in compliance. Next slide there. Lastly, for my report, I just want to take the opportunity to once again thank the Kent community. I am reminded all the time how much wonderful support we get from our community, and I think that is wonderful. I think that's one of the things that makes Kent special. In the last few weeks, we've received a ton amount of food from local businesses and restaurants, cards thanking us, and messages. We've received hundreds of masks and other protective equipment such as sanitizer and cleaning supplies. And this has just been incredible. It does help our officers and other Kent police employees keep their spirits up. It does feel good to know that while we're out there every day doing our part, the community at large truly does appreciate it. So we just want to take time to say thank you. And that completes my report, Mayor, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Chief, very much for that report. Council, are there any questions for the chief?
I have one, Your Honor.
Councilmember Boyce. Oh, is that Councilmember Thomas?
It is.
Okay,
One of the
sorry.
two men, huh? Thank you, Your Honor. Hey, Ref, I should say Chief. With all the 6-foot, extension things in between people and the overloading, and that means that you talk about with your jail, does that mean you're sending more over to Eastern Washington at this point?
Great question. Thank you for the question there, Councilmember Thomas. Actually, we do have some that are being housed in Yakima. So we did send some people over early. The ones that we sent to Yakima were those that have longer sentences. Those who are going to stay at a municipal jail. As you know, we can keep people, or the longest sentence that can be imposed is a year. So those that had longer sentences that we could move, we did. And so there are some there. But the majority of our releases were people that we were able to put on programs, maybe put on electronic monitoring or some other way to keep tabs of them, but to release them for our jail to create an environment there where we have single bunks. So we've done that. In addition to that, we have a wing for isolation, and we even have cells set up for quarantine for the worst of scenarios. So that's what we've done.
Follow up, if I might, Your Honor.
Yes.
So, Chief, does that mean that you're okay there at the Kent jail, that everything so far, that you've had no virus in the inmates reported?
Correct. We haven't had any positive hits as of yet, which is very fortunate.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, and I forgot to add in there to your question. Let's make it really clear. We've set ourselves up that if we need to put people in jail, we have space for that. So I don't want it to sound like we can't take anybody else in the jail.
Right.
We've made adjustments for that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Councilmember Thomas. I can tell you, having spoken with several of our corrections officers, they are doing everything in their power to make sure that the jail stays healthy, temperature checking, extra cleaning, separation, all of those kind of things. So I'm extremely proud of our jail staff and the work, our corrections officers and the work that they're doing in the face of this. So want to make sure that we recognize them as well. Any other questions for the chief? All right, I am not seeing any. Chief, again, thank you for the report and everything you're doing to keep our community safe.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we are going to move into the reports section from council and staff. I will start off this round of reports, and thinking of the most logical order, I think we'll start with some concerns, issues, and things that are happening at the federal level, and we'll work our way down. So the one regional meeting that I have attended in the last couple of weeks was in my role as a member of the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board. That meeting was called to disperse just over $500 million in federal aid to transit agencies in the region being Kitsap, Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties. So that funding will go directly to transit agencies who, as you all are aware, have been significantly impacted during this. We're seeing ridership numbers anywhere from 73% for Metro up into the 90% for Sound Transit. So some of that money being used for ongoing operations, some of it being used for capital projects. The exec board did get together and make their recommendations on that federal funding that was issued. You heard Councilmember Dunn talk a little bit about some of that federal aid that is coming to Washington State, both to the state and King County. I will tell you, I'm extremely disappointed today as that federal package referred to as 3.5 passed. There still is not any direct support to cities under 500,000, which when you take a look, and particularly in King County, the majority of the population in King County lives in cities under 500,000. We are all being impacted by what is happening and not seeing any sort of relief from the federal government. So I will tell you that I can speak for myself and many of our local mayors. We have been lobbying our federal delegation, and there has been support from our delegation, but obviously not enough for the vote to see any direct aid to cities. So we will continue to ask for that, point out why the need is there, and hope that in this time of crisis that our federal government comes through for municipalities. At the state level, we did talk about this again during Councilmember Dunn's report. We were extremely disappointed when the governor issued his vetoes around budget several weeks ago. So you've heard me report multiple times on the work that we're doing around streamlined sales tax and the loss of sales tax revenue to Kent. I will say we were successful with the legislature in getting that streamlined sales tax mitigation continued through 2026 in an effort to save money in the state budget. The governor did veto that money going forward. But what was more disappointing, we had money committed to us previously that would have taken us through July of 2021, and the governor also vetoed that money. Money that had already been budgeted for projects here in the city. We did send a letter. I'm very grateful for the support of all three of our King County council members, Von Reichbauer, Up the Grove, and Councilmember Dunn, that signed on in support of
cities in King County, Washington.
We're pleased for, very grateful for their support in the letter that is going to the governor's office, as well as the Kent Chamber of Commerce and the Kent Downtown Partnership. Given all of the impacts of the COVID pandemic, the hit of that streamlined sales tax, especially in the short term this last year, just simply compounds the issues that we're having here budget-wise at the city. So we are asking the governor to reconsider that action that he has taken. Want to also talk about a few other things that we've been working on here. We put together a letter today and have reached out to all of our South County cities and have received support from all of the mayors in those cities to send a letter to the governor encouraging him to allow construction to move forward. Over the last week, the building industry, contractors, and our labor unions came together and presented what I believe to be an extremely responsible and safe plan to return to allow construction to move forward. And we are hopeful that the governor takes that into consideration and allows construction activity to begin occurring with all of those precautions that have been put in place. Additionally, we've been in conversation with local healthcare providers. They have done something very similar and presented to the governor a plan to allow what is being called elective medical procedures to move forward. The thing that I want to point out about this, there's in an effort to prevent surge in hospitals and the having capacity issues, all procedures outside of things related to COVID have been canceled. When we talk about that, that also means things like cancer treatment. And we've put a pause on all of that. We have not seen the surge at the hospitals. the hospitals they're in the business of controlling things like infectious diseases and have presented a plan to the governor to allow that activity to move forward. And I am 100% supportive of that for the health of our community. We are seeing things that are procedures that are being delayed that are detrimental to the health of our residents. And my hope is that in the phased return to whatever normal looks like as we come out of this, that we look at those low risk activities and allow them to start taking place again. We did hear in the governor's press conference this evening that some of those things were under consideration. So I will tell you, we are urging him to take action to allow those things to safely resume. On the last part of my report is on city finances. We have provided some updates to both the council and the community. This pandemic has created significant issues and shortfalls in the city budget. We're looking at decreased revenues between now and the end of the year of over $10 million. In an effort to make sure that the city is responsible and sustainable, we are working with all of our department directors to identify budget cuts. And the reality is that is going to be done through expenditures and the services that we provide to our community. These are not things we take lightly, and there is definite concern around them, but like I said, in an effort to make sure that we are sustainable and are here to provide the services that our community needs to move forward, we will be presenting a series of budget cuts over the next month. So commitment to the council and my commitment to the community is we will keep you informed as we do those things. And none of these decisions will be taken lightly. Significant amount of discussion and analysis before we make those cuts. With that, I am going to turn it over to Derek Matheson for the Chief Administrative Officer's report.
All right, thank you, Mayor Ralph. So as you heard, almost all of our time on the second floor here is spent on COVID-19 in one way or another. Mayor talked about the budget impacts, but we're also starting to think about how we bring our employees back into the office and or back onto normal schedules when the governor's order eventually changes. You're aware our Emergency Coordination Center has been active since early March, but this past week we made a shift and now our emphasis is on recovery. So some of the things that group is working on is the return to work timeline, workplace health and safety, including personal protective equipment and workstation needs, and also resources and support for returning employees. We also need to take a look at telecommuting policies and procedures going forward, because now that we've had this grand experiment to have a lot of employees telecommuting, we need to look at whether or what portions of that continue or not in the future. So those are just some of the things that we're working on here. The rest of my written report is in your packet, and we have no executive session this evening.
All right, thank you, Derek. We will move on to council members' reports. Council President Troutner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had several presentations at workshop today. The first presentation was on the Transportation Improvement Program update. The TIP short-range planning document is required by the state, and it lists our projects and plan by plan year. This allows us to apply for federal and state grants. Some projects have been removed from this list because they have been completed, which includes South 224th Street Extension Phase 1 and 2, and Kent Valley Flashing Yellow Left Arrow Lights. New state project grants are coming up, which include additional pedestrian improvements on 132nd Southeast and Russell Road pedestrian improvements from Meeker to South James. Federal grant projects include preservation improvements and road safety improvements. Updates on projects also included those on Naden Avenue and Willis improvements, Meeker Street, and 64th, just to name a few. Next up, we will have more information on the Transportation Improvement Program at our Committee of the Whole meeting on May 26th. We had a presentation on our stormwater system update. It started with some background on regional watersheds and City of Kent watersheds. We saw drone slides that show some of the drainage challenges that we have in the Kent Valley. If you recall, back in December, we had a really wet storm. It had significant impact on our city, including rainfall and flooding. This continues to show the importance of our levee work along the Green River and in the valley. We heard a list of current projects for new levees and improvements. Along with flood control projects, all of our projects include some kind of salmon habitat restoration. We have a very complex stormwater system, but we are always at risk for flooding in the Kent Valley. Stormwater projects will continue as they reduce our flood risk for next fall and the winter rainy season. Lastly, we heard about the Human Capital Management Project. This will resolve pay-related issues and needs with a focus of best practices for HR, finance, IT, and citywide timekeeping using Workday. A core implementation team is working together to develop guiding principles to include standardized process, policy, and data values. The goal is to build a simple, intuitive, and user experience. This project will touch every employee and will push us forward where we need to be, including more efficient. Implementation plan started in mid-January, architecture work February to mid-March, configure and prototype mid-March to June 5th, and testing will begin in early June through October with a deployment possibly in November or December to early January. Because of the complexity of this project and then COVID-19, the timeline has needed to be adjusted. More to come on this at future Committee of the Whole meetings. Now I will turn to my council members. We will kind of start like we do during a normal council meeting at the end with Councilmember Michaud, if any of you have reports.
Thank you, Council President. I do not have anything to report.
All right, Councilmember Core, do you have anything to share?
Thank you. I do not have any updates either.
Councilmember Larmer.
I have no updates as well.
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. As you know, PIC was canceled for the month of April. I just want to make a comment to our CEO. I appreciate your report more now than ever, but things are kind of quiet. So I enjoy reading your report, and I just want to kind of pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas, do you have anything to share?
Thank you. I would echo what Councilmember Boyce just said. I really appreciate the reports, Derek, more than ever now. So thank you very much. I do have a postscript, I think, to some of the things that have happened today. We talked about cities over 500,000. Guess what? There's only one. That's Seattle. This shows the importance of being large, and it really trickles down even further later on as funds may become available. They'll hand it out by population. And I just Googled, Kent is no longer the 6th largest. We are now the 7th. We just got passed by Everett. And I just want to make that note that the importance of population, as you've heard me preach many times. So that's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fincher. Does Councilmember Fincher have anything?
The Mental Illness and Drug Dependency Advisory Council meets this Thursday. Nothing else to report.
All right, thank you. I don't think I forgot anyone this time. So Madam Mayor, that ends our reports.
All right, thank you. All right, we are going to move on in the agenda. We have no public hearing. Public comment. We do request during this time of virtual meetings and social distancing, that if the public has comment, they would provide it directly to the City Council at citycouncil@kentwa.gov or by calling 253-856-5700. Moving on to the consent calendar, this is a compilation of the work that the council has done via the Committee of the Whole over the last several weeks. That Committee of the Whole is still happening on the regular schedule and business is still being conducted. So we do have a consent calendar. Madam President, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve consent calendar items A through H.
Second.
Right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0 and the consent calendar passes. We do not have any other business this evening, but we do have two bids. We've got the Kent Correctional Facility Plumbing Project, as well as the 2020 Plastic Markings Bid Award. We've got, looks like Alex Ackley and Nate Harper on the call for the correction facility bid.
Good evening, Mayor
Good
and
evening.
members of the council. So thank you for letting me come to the meeting this evening and share this information for our project. As you know, this project is for the City of Kent Correctional Facility. We have put together a project for some much needed repairs and replacement of the plumbing in the building for a 35-year-old facility. We put this out to bid last month with the bids being due on March 20th, and we only got 2 bids on the project, one being from Olympic Peninsula Construction and the other being from MTech LLC. The project, the bids came in a little higher than we, of course, wanted or anticipated. But that was due to some items that are out of our control, like the bid climate and such like that. The lowest responsible bid was MTech LLC for $862,733.75. It's our opinion. We've vetted this, and we feel good with recommending to move forward with this vendor for this project.
Nate, thank you for that report. Does council have any questions regarding this bid award? Okay, I am not seeing any. I'm going to call on Councilmember Boyce to make a motion, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like a motion to award the correction plumbing project bid to MTech LLC in the amount of $862,733.75 and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the city attorney and parks director.
Okay, is there a second? Second for the motion, please.
Second.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to council for awarding that bid. This is one of those projects that is very, very much needed for our jail. The corrections staff is dealing with issues with this plumbing on a daily basis. So thank you for awarding that bid, and thank you, Nate, for presenting this evening.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is 2020 plastic markings.
From across the street.
Perfect. Tim Laporte joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We do recommend awarding this endeavor. We have received 4 bids, 3 of which were underneath the engineer's estimate. So we feel very good about awarding this project. Every year we do about a third of the city. This year we're doing a little less than that, but the bids came in really good, and we are actually going to be, with council and mayor approval, we're probably going to be proposing a small change order to bring it up to the budgeted amount. Again, the plastic markings wear out every year. They're very essential, particularly in the dark, rainy months, for people to, drivers really need this delineation. And we feel it's very, very important to do this. I would actually say it's even more important than repaving streets, because drivers and vehicles need to know basically where to go and where to stop. So for many reasons, we would like to move ahead with this, and we're very pleased with the bids that we did get. Available for any questions.
All right, any questions for Tim? Okay, seeing none. Councilmember Fincher, do you have a motion?
I do, Madam Mayor. And I am trying to get it back up on the computer. I can't get to my motion, Madam Mayor. I can't get back to it. Would you please have?
Yes.
Oh, here it is. Award the 2020. I move to award the 2020 Plastic Markings Project to Specialized Pavement Markings, Inc. in the amount of $150,630, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents subject to the final terms and conditions acceptable to the mayor and Public Works Director.
Second.
All right, thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, we do not have, thank you, Tim, for that presentation. We do not have an executive session this evening. So with that, we have come to the end of the agenda. Want to remind everyone, please stay safe, wash your hands, social distancing still is in effect, and be kind to each other. Everybody's under a lot of stress. Just take some time to look out for your neighbor, look out for your friend or family member, and remember, we are all in this together, because at the end of the day, we are Kent. Thank you very, very much, and we are adjourned.